So what actually is courage? I'm more than happy to give the ancient Greeks the courage medal. When we watch movies like the 300, I'm looking at the things those Spartans are doing and I'm thinking I could absolutely never do that. I mean, I'm too afraid to order my food unless I rehearse what I'm going to say at least 3 times over in my head before I place my order, and I'm too scared to take the subway past 9 p.m. Though, to be fair, I do think a Spartan soldier would have a hard time holding their own down there as well. But the ancient Greeks can certainly teach us a few things about courage. Two key or principal speakers in Laches are Laches himself and Nicias. And both of these individuals are high-achieving Athenian generals. And so, of course, their ideas of what it means to be courageous are very rooted in the military and acts of war. All the definitions or potential definitions that they provide of courage have to do with war, but we can still extract main ideas and the essence of their definitions to understand a more general concept of courage. They have a very hard time giving Socrates a compelling definition of courage. Again, all of their definitions are very rooted in warfare, but Laches does have a stab at giving a definition of courage to Socrates first, and he says that it's when a man remains at his post and doesn't run away. This would be a soldier. They remain at their post and they do not run away out of there, and to him, that is what's courageous. Socrates intervenes and says that sometimes retreat can be a tactical move, and so it shouldn't be considered a wimpy thing to run away from your fears or your problems, given that sometimes you have to take a step back and collect yourself, make yourself stronger, and then you're more prepared to face your fears and fight what was giving you issues. This works for, warfare. Sometimes retreat can be tactical, but also just for our day-to-day life. It's something that's making us fearful. It's not necessarily always the most courageous thing to immediately try and fight it, but sometimes we need to take a step back and improve ourselves, collect ourselves before we try and face that fear. Laches then gives his second definition of courage, which is that courage is an endurance of the soul. Socrates is more okay with this definition because it's finally stepping away from warfare, but he still has issues with what it actually means to show endurance. We have endurance and wisdom, that is a fine and noble thing, but if we show endurance with folly, that is no longer so courageous.
Chicken! Look, I'll have your leg. Right, I'll do you for that. You what? Come here. What are you gonna do, bleed on me? I'm invincible! You're a loony.
If we're just repeatedly doing actions that are kind of stupid and not really thinking about it, and yeah, we're showing endurance because we're keeping at it and trying our best, but it's a stupid and bad thing that we're doing, then maybe you're not so courageous. This is my controversial take of things, but it could apply to Harry Potter. Can we consider him courageous? Because in every single book and movie, he goes against the teacher's orders, and yes, he is showing his endurance in destroying Lord Voldemort, but he's doing it at the risk of so many lives of himself and his friends, and we consider Harry Potter courageous. And I think Socrates would say, well, no, because he is showing endurance, sure, but he's showing endurance and folly. Whereas if someone is showing endurance and wisdom, they're knowing what they're doing and what they're getting themselves into, then that's actually a courageous person. So moral of the story there, if you want to be courageous in the eyes of the ancient Greeks, you have to show endurance, but endurance for the right reasons and for the right thing. So our friend Nicias, who's been kind of silent throughout this entire thing, finally steps in. He has a few snarky remarks between him and Laches about who can give a better definition of courage. Typical drama that the ancient Greeks so loved. So Nicias deduces that courage is a form of wisdom. He uses Socratic intellectualism for this argument, which is this idea that wisdom in itself is goodness and ignorance in itself is badness. To be courageous, you must also be wise and good. When I say Socratic intellectualism, I feel like people just slowly fell asleep, clicked out the video, closed their laptops. But what this basically means is that a bad person cannot be considered courageous. So a good contemporary example of this is Darth Vader. It's a great Reddit question. Can we consider Darth Vader courageous? I mean, building a Death Star that blows up. planets and kills millions of people is certainly something that takes a lot of nerve, but I don't know if we could consider him courageous, and Nicias certainly wouldn't think so because he's bad. You have to be good and wise to be courageous as well. Socrates is like, wow, okay, so basically Nicias is saying that courage can only be possessed by a few people, because to be wise and to be good is a hard thing to achieve for the ancient Greeks, and so only a handful of people would actually be able to be considered courageous. So they go into this conversation about whether we can consider wild beasts and children as courageous, as they do sometimes make acts that are brave. But Nicias says absolutely no way. They are mad, irrational, lack the foresight to understand the complexities of their decision. They cannot be considered courageous. So sorry, Harry Potter, but not happening today. As we'll see with a lot of the ancient texts, we get a very unsatisfying ending, as we do not get one final definition of courage. Instead, Socrates says that they need to go back to school as they're clearly not qualified enough to actually understand what courage means, and so they cannot give a definition of it. Retrospectively, it's kind of, a noble thing that they were able to admit that, but a little bit frustrating for us, because all we can take away from this was the journey along the way, the things we learned, the essence of the idea of being courageous, but we do not get this final definition that we can worship as the definition of courage. Socrates does give a few lines that helps us understand courage, even if it's not a concise definition. And he says that courage is a type of knowledge where you understand future goods and evils, so you know what's at risk, but also what's to win from your acts of bravery, but you also understand those of the present and the past as well.